Elizabeth was a well-to-do trader. Her fabric shop was the biggest in the whole market. Her shop was the last resort for all types of fabrics. But despite these material blessings God has adorned her with, there was a big problem. She did not have a child, and she was not getting any younger. She was once married to the love of her life, but for 20 years she tried to get pregnant, but all to no avail. She was moving from one hospital to another just to find a solution to her problem. But each time the doctor ran a test on her, they could not see the cause of her childlessness. Much to her horror, even her husband was medically okay. What was then delaying their childbirth? They wondered to themselves. And the doctors would place them on pills they believe would boost their body system and aid her to conceive very fast. But despite taking all this medication, there was no result. Whenever Elizabeth sees a monthly visitor, she would break down in tears and weep profusely, knowing that yet another month has passed her without her taking in. Whenever she breaks down crying, Unandi, her husband, will always be by her side to console her.
Sweetheart, why are you working yourself up for nothing? Am I pressuring you to give me a child? Don't you know you can develop high blood pressure due to overthinking? Please try to be happy, my love. God's time is the best.
He would stare her with the look of compassion on his face. He was really unhappy that this was happening to them. He too felt very bad because of their childlessness, but he kept his concern to himself. He did not want Elizabeth to worry, and he would always put up a bright face even though he was very unhappy. In the quest to put an end to their childlessness, they went from one prayer house to another. They fasted and prayed endlessly, but all to no avail. It seems their prayer were not being answered. And as the years went on, their trouble even became deeper. Her neighbor in the market soon started gossiping about her. She was a subject of their constant gossip. She is using her unborn babies for money ritual. No wonder her shop is growing at a fast pace, they would murmur among themselves. And some of these market women soon started finding means to intentionally provoke her so that they would openly disgrace her and abuse her with her childlessness. Elizabeth knew they were envious of her success, and she tried her best to avoid their trouble. But whenever they pushed her to the wall and she decided to express her displeasure, they would gladly start shouting and calling her names. You shameless woman, do you think we don't know? You are involved in a secret covenant that is taking the life of your unborn babies and giving you money in its stead. Useless woman, they would rain abuses at her. All this rent the heart of Elizabeth. Why was the universe so cruel to her? Even though she was well to do, she was very unhappy. She knew these women were treating her this way because she had no child to her name. She knows if she could give birth to even one child, that would be the end of all these insults. She was so desperate for a child that she even visited a traditional herbalist who, after listening to her, gave her some herbs, magical herbs that would help her bear a child very fast. The native doctor told her, but even with these herbs, there was no success, which made her even more devastated. And just like so, 20 years had gone by, 20 years of bitter tears and endless insults from their neighbors. After trying for so long to get a child of their own without succeeding, Unadi called Elizabeth one evening to have a word with her.
My love, you know it has been 20 years now since we got married, and we have tried every available option to have a child of our own, but all to no avail. We are not getting any younger. I would advise that we adopt a child and raise it as our own, a child that will take care of us in our old age and inherit our property after we pass on.
He told her in a calm, soothing tone, filled with emotion. For a while, Elizabeth was silent. She too had been thinking of this option for a while, but she was not sure how her husband would take it. Now that it was Unandi who first raised the topic, Elizabeth was very happy. She gladly agreed to her husband's suggestions, and they hugged each other warmly, and they started researching and making preparation to visit a good orphanage to adopt a child for themselves. And it was not long before they located an orphanage with a good reputation. They were showed around the orphanage for them to see the children, and it was not long before they made up their mind. Because of all the children there was one who stood out from the rest. He was a very handsome child, rosy and looking very healthy. They fell in love with the child almost immediately, and they made up their mind there and then to adopt the child. The whole documentation went pretty smoothly, and they soon returned back home with this child. They were overjoyed. They could not contain their happiness at the little bundle of joy on their laps, and they wondered why they had not taken this decision a long time before now. And they named the child Maswe. Little did they know, great trouble was around the corner. Initially, everything went on pretty smoothly for their cute little family. They showered little Maswe with so much love and affection and flattered him with anything money could afford. But then, just after 2 years of adopting this cute little boy, disaster struck. Unandi fell sick. What simply started as malaria sickness soon escalated into something altogether more serious, a strange illness that baffled the doctors. The medicine the doctors gave to him were not having any positive effects on him. Elizabeth wailed as she watched the life gradually leaving her husband. She ran to the doctors in tears. Doctor, what is happening to my husband? Please help me. I don't want to lose him. She pleaded with more bitter tears flowing down her face. The doctor was moved by her tears. He shook his head.
My dear, in my 26 years of practice as a medical doctor, I have not seen a case like that of your husband. He is not responding to any treatment. I would advise you to seek spiritual help. His case is not ordinary.
He told her, his tone calm but firm. Elizabeth was very unhappy. She wondered where they had gone wrong to deserve this. But then, while she was making preparation to move Unandi out of the hospital, that was when he called on her. With a faint voice, he started.
Sweetheart, I just want you to know that I love you so much. Please take very good care of our son and make sure he grows into an intelligent and respectful young man. When he is grown, please tell him his father loves him so much.
He told her, his voice barely audible. He was very weak. Elizabeth was surprised because of the words coming from her husband. Why is he sounding this way? She wondered to herself. Honey, please don't talk like this. You are going nowhere. Both of us will raise our child together, she told him, while tapping him gently. But that was when it dawned on her that something was not right. Unadi was not responsive. She shook him, but he was not moving. She was horrified and ran out to call the doctors. The doctor and a team of his nurses ran down to the ward. By the time they got there, it was already too late. Unandi had passed on. The news of Unandi passing came as a bombshell to Elizabeth. She broke down in tears, Totally dejected and devastated, she cried profusely, refusing to be comforted. Unazi's remains were taken to his ancestral home to be laid. Even though Elizabeth was very devastated and mourning the passing of her husband, the little child on her lap remained a beacon of hope. His innocent smile became a source of joy in a dark hour, and she made up her mind to take very good care of him and fulfill her husband's wish on his deathbed. And true enough, Elizabeth raised Maswe as her own child. She enrolled him in the best school she could find and treated him like a young prince. She showered him with so much love and attention. But in all this, she could not help but notice something very strange about Maswe. At such a young age, he was already stealing from her. It all began when Elizabeth started noticing that her pot of soup was getting spoiled. Each morning, she will wake up to meet the pot of soup soured, no matter how well she preserved it the previous night. It was very clear that someone was picking meat from her pot of soup at night. She confronted her housemaid as to why her soup was always getting spoiled, but she too was clueless. She called on Maswe to ask him if he was the one tampering with her pot of soup, but he totally denied ever getting near the kitchen at night, not to talk of tampering with a pot of soup. This made Elizabeth really confused. She did not know what to believe anymore. And this continued like this until one fateful morning when Elizabeth caught her son red handed. Elizabeth went to Maswell's room to check on him that morning. Maswell was still sound asleep, but she noticed something very strange. The finger of his right hand was soiled with egusi soup. Elizabeth knew immediately he was the one tampering with a pot of soup every night. This made her very angry. She woke him up and started scolding him harshly. What is the meaning of this nonsense? How can you tamper with my pot of soup? Is there anything you lack in this house? She queried him. She was really pissed off. Maswell looked down, avoiding her gaze. He felt really embarrassed and looked very sorry. He promised her he would turn a new leaf and be of good conduct. Elizabeth forgave him. Little did she know this was just the beginning of her troubles, because as the years slowly crawled by, the dark seed of ambition in Maswe became even more obvious. He was a very stubborn child. He was very rude to his teacher and always involved in fights with his classmates. All these constant reports from Maswell school broke the heart of Elizabeth. She was trying her best to give this child the best life could offer, but here he was taking her effort for granted. And because of Maswell's behavior, she started contemplating returning him to the orphanage where they adopted him from. But whenever the thought crossed her mind, she would remember the last words from her late husband on his deathbed. She must raise Maswe as her own and give him the best life has to offer. Once she remembered these words, she would take a deep breath and overlook most of his excesses. And whenever his school threatened to rusticate him, Elizabeth will always plead with them to temper justice with mercy and give him one more chance. Elizabeth was always advising him, but all her words would go in through the right ear and leave through the left ear. He was very defiant and clearly disturbed. However, something happened one day in his school that would be the last straw that would break the camel's back. Maswe was involved in his usual fight with one of his classmates. This boy was Obi, son of one of Elizabeth's neighbors in the market. They soon got into a heated argument and they started exchanging words. That was when Obi made a very bold statement.
You, this Maswe, you are biting more than you can chew. You that do not know your real parents. My mother told me your story. You are a bastard thrown away at birth. If not for Madame Elisabeth, who took you from the gutters and adopted you, do you think you will have the audacity to stand in front of me? If you think I'm lying to you, go and ask your so-called mother.
He told him in a very loud voice. A hush fell over the whole class. They were hearing this for the very first time. Maswe was both shocked and confused. He had always known Elizabeth to be his biological mother all his life, and this information shook him to the very roots. All eyes were on him. He looked over his shoulder. His classmates were laughing and pointing fingers at him. He felt so humiliated. He grabbed his bag and ran out of the class. He could not stop the tears from flowing down his cheek. He ran back home, all the while praying and hoping that Obi was wrong about all this. Back at home that evening, Elizabeth could tell immediately that Maswe, her child, was very unhappy. His countenance was very heavy. "What is the matter, my son?" Elizabeth asked him with the look of worried concern on her face. For a while, Maswe was silent. After a while, he replied to her.
Mama, tell me the truth. Are you my real mother?
He asked her. Elizabeth was shocked and taken aback. She was not prepared for this question from Maswe. "What? What do you mean? Of course, I'm your real mother," she stuttered, avoiding his gaze. Maswe was not convinced. He could see clearly that Elizabeth was not telling him the truth. Maswe went on to narrate everything that happened in their class earlier on, all the while pleading with her to tell him the whole truth. For a long time, Elizabeth was silent, contemplating the best answer to give to Maswe. After a while, she told him, "My son, I have been meaning to tell you this all this while, but I thought the time was not ripe yet to tell you this. I'm not your biological mother. I and your father adopted you from an orphanage when you were just a little child, but this should not make you worry. I have vowed to provide for you and raise you as my only child," she told him. This word hit Maswe very hard. He felt betrayed. How could she hide such a vital information from him? He thought to himself angrily. He marched off from the sitting room without saying a single word. He went into his bedroom and locked the door securely behind him. He was crying and heartbroken. He could not help but feel a deep-seated hatred for Elizabeth. "She is the reason I had to face this humiliation from my classmates," he thought to himself. Elizabeth was very worried. She could see clearly that Maswell was very unhappy. She went to his bedroom to try talking to him, but his door was locked. She knocked and knocked, but Maswell refused to open. She could hear him crying from within, and this really broke Elizabeth's heart. How had she wronged Maswe? She thought to herself. Even though she was not his biological mother, not even for once had she made him feel like an outsider. Most of her resources went into taking care of him and providing for Maswe. All the same, she blamed herself for keeping his adoption a secret. She understood he was upset and confused. When he calmed down, I will make him understand, she thought to herself. Little did she know, things would go south pretty quickly. Because that same evening, while Elizabeth was in her bedroom freshening up, Maxwell sneaked into her bedroom, opened the drawer, took her cash and jewelries and ran away from home. He was finding his real parents and he was proving to everyone he was not a bastard, even though he had no clear plans in his mind as to how to find his parents. He left into the gathering ducks. Elizabeth was very surprised to see Maxwell was nowhere to be found. She was very shocked to find her drawer empty. Her expensive jewelries and cash has been taken. She knew immediately what Maxwell has done. He had robbed her and ran away from home. Elizabeth was very unhappy. She had provided this child with all money has to offer. Yet, here she was, getting paid with evil for all her good. Even though she was very mad at Maswe, she could not help but feel very worried. So the very next day, early in the morning, Elizabeth rushed down to the police station to formally complain about what has happened. She was very worried about his whereabouts and she combed the city, wondering where Maswell could be. She checked all the places where he could be, but he was nowhere to be found. She rushed down to the orphanage where she adopted him from, but he was not there either. All this made her very sad and worried. Meanwhile, out on the streets, Maswell soon fell into a gang of bad street boys and he started smoking and drinking with them. With so much money to spend, they welcomed him into their midst with open arms. Even though he had no clue as to how to find his parents, he felt a feeling of acceptance among these boys. Among them, he was free as a bird. His bad behavior was totally accepted. He could drink to his heart content and forget his sorrow. He was even privileged to have his way with some of the ladies in the hood. Hey, before we jump right back into our story, today's warm hug goes to Miss Pat, watching from Ireland, and Blaze, watching from London, UK. Thank you for the love and support. Where are you watching us from? Type it in the comment section so I can send you a hug in the next episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a like on this video. Alright, back to our story. Meanwhile, back at home, Elizabeth was devastated. It has been over a month since the disappearance of Maswe. She had searched everywhere, frantically, but he was nowhere to be found. She even put up his picture in some top media around the city as the missing person and offered a reward to anyone who could provide valuable information as to his whereabouts. But all her efforts yielded no results. But just when all hope seemed lost, one evening, standing right at the doorstep of Elizabeth was Maswe, looking all worn out and a shadow of his former self. His eyes were red and swelling, like someone who had taken hard substance. He had squandered all the money he stole from Elizabeth, and he was back pleading for forgiveness and acceptance into her home. Elizabeth received Maxwell's return with mixed feelings. While she was happy to finally see her lost son, she was very unhappy with the condition he was in. It was very clear that Maxwell was already doing drugs at such a young age, and this really broke Elizabeth's heart. All the same, she forgave him and took him back, hoping that maybe Maxwell had learned his lesson and was ready to turn a new leaf. She could not have been more wrong. Just 1 week of Maxwell's return, things got really worse. He refused to attend classes. He was always at home smoking and drinking. And this strange behavior did not go down well with Elizabeth. And they were always quarreling. Elizabeth was very upset that Maxwell was just taking all her efforts to raise him right for granted. So do you mean I'm not good enough to be your mother, right? If your biological parents were responsible people, do you think they would throw you away at such a tender age? Go and look for them so I can have my peace of mind, she would tell him out of anger. And this statement from Elizabeth only fueled Maxwell's hatred for her.
You old fool. You are not worthy to be my mother either. I will look for my real parent.
He would stare her angrily, and whenever they started quarreling like this, Maxwell would break into Elizabeth's bedroom and steal her cash along with anything of value he could lay his hands on and run away from home to be with the bad street boys, where he would squander everything on drugs and women. Once the whole money is spent and there was no more money to throw around, he would come back home weeping and begging and promising to be of good behavior. Elizabeth was totally fed up with Maxwell's character but she would always forgive and take him in, because whenever she contemplates taking him back to the orphanage and rejecting him from home, the words of her late husband would ring clear in her mind. She had promised to raise Maswe and showered him with so much love and affection. But then, Maswe's errant behavior really broke the heart of Elizabeth. She would cry most nights, wondering where she had gone wrong. The same child who ought to be the source of her joy was the one bringing her great grief. And to make matters worse, whenever Maswe was drunk and they started quarreling and arguing, he would beat her up and run away from home for months, carrying along Elizabeth's money and valuables. And whenever he returned, obviously, Elizabeth will receive him back with open hands. This went on like this until something happened. It was on a fateful evening. Maswe had started smoking and drinking and misbehaving as usual, and they soon got into a heated argument. To cool her head, Elizabeth went upstairs. She stood by the outside corridor at her home with so much thought running through her mind. Little did she know, great trouble was just around the corner. Maswe was very mad at Elizabeth. This was when a dark idea ran through his mind. He was going to push her downstairs to break her leg so she could suffer for the rest of her life, he thought to himself, with the look of reckless determination on his face. Immediately, he sneaked upstairs, and even before Elizabeth could know what was happening, Maswe heard her from behind and started pushing her over the rail. Elizabeth held onto the rail for her dear life. She was screaming and pleading with Maswe to have mercy on her, but all her plead fell on deaf ears. Maswe was much stronger than Elizabeth, and it was not long before he tossed her over. She fell to the ground and hit her head on the hard floor and lost consciousness. She was badly injured. This was when the severity of what he just did hit him. He was frightened and fidgeting. He did not mean to unalive her. He just wanted her to suffer for scolding him. He felt an instant wave of regret wash through him. He rushed back downstairs, all the while calling the emergency line and explaining everything to them. An ambulance immediately rushed down to the scene to take Elizabeth to the hospital. She was unconscious and losing a lot of blood. They soon arrived at the hospital, but it was already too late. Elizabeth could not make it. She had kicked the bucket. As for Maswe, he was detained while the police commenced investigation. After some months, Maswe was arraigned before the court. Maswe was pretty honest. He agreed to his crime. He said he never intended to unalive her. He just wanted to fracture her bones and make her suffer for the rest of her life. He was crying. He was really sorry for the foolish action he had taken. Anyway, the judge found him guilty of the charges leveled against him, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. So here bring our story to a close. What did you learn from this story? Share it with us in the comment section so we all can learn from this story. Thank you for watching today's episode from Anita Chocolate. Please don't forget to support my work by subscribing to this channel and leave a like on this video and turn on the notification bell so you will be the first to see our next upload. Also watch these other stories from our channel displaying on your screen while waiting for the next episode. Bye.